What that means? That means it is time yet again, even though we missed last week, it's time for another episode of Made of Metal. My name's Tony Davis. Right beside me is Jack Sullivan. I am outside the Elway Theater in downtown Albuquerque because we have a wrestling show that's starting in 65 minutes. But since we missed last week, I made it a point to make sure that we squeeze this episode in because I don't like skipping the same. I don't like breaking the habit twice in a row. So here we are.
Same, same. Well, I know we're on a little bit more of a time crunch than usual. Um, yeah, you looks like you're traveling quite a bit in the next couple days, right? You're going to a couple states.
Yeah. So I'm wrestling here in Albuquerque tonight. Tomorrow, I'm hopping in a car with three other wrestlers. We're driving up to Denver to wrestle there. And then on Saturday, we're driving from Denver about 90 minutes further north to Cheyenne, Wyoming to wrestle there before we come back home, back to Albuquerque on Sunday. So it's going to be a busy weekend for the four of us.
Woo! That's cool.
Yeah, it's gonna be a wild time. It'll be fun though. And then the weekend after that, I'll be in Orlando on some business stuff. And then the weekend after that, I'll be back in Denver for another 2 day wrestling trip there. So it's gonna be a fun few weeks.
Awesome. Sorry, we got a dog we're watching, and Ellen just left to take another dog on a walk that we're watching, and he's sad.
Fair. What's new and exciting over in the old Midwest there, Jack?
Aside from snow, got a very, very whiny dog here. Um, he's he's very sad. No, we just got blasted with a bunch of snow. Um, you know, it's been a lot of the same over here. Training for the tactical games just entered into a different phase of programming, so that's keeping things exciting.
The training's going super well.
I mean, honestly, the physical training. I'm waiting for things to warm up a little bit so I can actually get some shooting in. But the program that we use actually gives rankings of each person participating in this training program. And I'm in general in the top 10 out of at least 70 people for whatever that counts for a lot of the movements. So movements workouts. So it's cool to
That's
see. We'll be tested come July when it's actually all going down. But
yeah,
that does feel
that's
good to
that's
be in that.
exactly where you wanted to be too.
Yeah, yeah, yes, exactly. Now, if I could just shoot as well as I can work out, I might have a chance.
Well,
So
that's
we'll
why we
see.
got months. That's why you got months to practice. So you'll be fine. I believe in you.
Appreciate it. It'll be fun. But yeah.
Yeah, it'll be a good time. All right, Jack. Let's jump in. Let's hop onto this topic for the week. Um, this topic was actually kind of a layup. I know sometimes we wait until, I mean, we don't really decide any topics super last minute, but we usually go back and forth a lot of times on picking a topic. And this one came as a freebie because it came from a listener because she asked about, because we talk a lot on here about reps and reserve, we talk about RPE, we talk about training to failure. And so she sent me a message and asked what failure is like, or like how you know you're getting to failure, or how to get to failure safely. She gave me like this long text message with like 6 or 7 questions, and I was like, that's it. That's the that's the whole outline for the podcast. So that's basically what we're going to talk about today. So we are talking about training to failure, specifically how to get set up to train for failure, how to safely push to failure, and how to know whether or not it's really failure or if you're just kind of psyching yourself out.
Mhm. Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is that mental barrier to what is actually possible. And you shared that text with me, and I know like one of the first things I was like, this is described so well from someone who truly doesn't understand it. And the hope is that this this live today makes things a lot more understandable. And so you can actually learn to test these things and feel really confident about it.
Yeah. And that's the fact that it came from somebody that doesn't have a lot of experience with failure is perfect because I think a lot of times I know I fall into this trap where I don't properly gauge the other person's level of understanding when explaining things. And so it leads to that gap in between like where I'm explaining and where the person can actually understand. And so they might get maybe
Peace.
not, yeah, they might get a piece of what I'm talking about and then not go away with a complete understanding or even complete enough to really take anything what I'm saying. Um, that was the other reason I was like, yeah, that's the episode because like this is it's exactly like the level we need it to be, so we know that we can actually attack the topic from a standpoint that we know people can best understand.
Yes, 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 yes. So we'll go over how to fail safely when it comes to machines, free weights, body weight exercises. That's a little bit out there, but it's still possible. But I guess we should get into what training to failure really is. Couple key things would be mechanical versus technical failure. So we're getting in the weeds a little bit, but it is important to understand. So mechanical failure is like when you physically cannot complete another rep with good form. Technical failure would be breaking form and then reaching mechanical failure, right? Form breaks, and then you have the inability to complete the movement. So an example might be if someone's deadlifting, right? You want to keep a pretty, chest proud form, and if all of a sudden their shoulders round and their back arches a lot, that would be technical failure that would lead to mechanical. Hypothetically, we've probably all seen someone deadlift with a super rounded back. It's not necessarily quote unquote bad, but for this example, um, they had technical failure and then mechanical. Another example could be like think of like a chest press, a machine chest press. If someone, again, we want to be kind of that like chest proud and push. And if someone all of a sudden you see them go like this and start going, that would be their technical failure. They weren't able to keep their shoulders in the proper position to isolate chest, shoulders, triceps. So that would be your technical failure. Where mechanical um, would be holding good form and just getting to the point where you're just out of gas.
Yeah, and really that's the key even with either is form. So there are people out there this is more for like power lifters, but they'll train with a rounded upper back instead of a lower back because if you round with the upper back, it's you're not really going to get hurt with the upper back rounding because it's got more range of motion built into it, so it can. And when you round the upper back, you shorten the range of motion, so you can get the barbell up and still get your hip straighter. It's basically why they do it, and so they'll train that way. And so if that's the way you're training, then that's not really technical failure because it will come down to like, well, what's the ideal form you're going for? So if you're trying to train with a straight spine and your spine starts to round, like Jack said, now you're hitting that technical failure because now your form is moving away from where you started and where you're trying to stay in. So that's your technical failure. So even though you could still do more reps by letting your form change, technically you failed. Whereas the mechanical version is it's just the whole thing's just gone to shit. Like it's like the bar is going in all sorts of different directions. One side's coming up faster than the other side. Yeah, it's just it becomes real messy.
Yeah, so it's pushing with your full effort and right if there's some kind of failure. One of the big things that we're looking for is like we want to get close to failure and we want to see reps slowing down. That's a really important indicator while holding good form to see that we're in that appropriate range of weight and reps. And like we've talked about, is like that mechanical tension. So would also be a sign if you're getting close to failures, like when things start to slow down. Um, but again, that's pushing with full effort, um, and things begin to barely move or stop.
Yeah. And that's really the big key, right? To be like, how do you know that you're getting your failure? It's that. It's when that last rep is moving at a different speed than the first rep. And a lot of times I'll see people, they'll send like a video of their sets and they'll the last rep or the last two reps will start to slow down from the first, but it's like minute. Like you'd have to be watching real close to see a change in speed. We're talking more a super clear, definitive slowing down of movement speed. So if it's taking you 1 second to complete a full rep, failure in the sense that I usually look for, and I think this is the same sense that Jack would be looking for, is if we're starting off and a rep takes 1 second, we're generally looking for it to take like 2 to 3 seconds to complete a full rep. Now, the other caveat behind this is people will then ask, well, why don't I just do 3 second reps and just start it off slow that way? The reason you don't want to do it that way is because you still have to put max effort into the movement. Because if you're not putting max effort, you're not activating as many muscle fibers as you can. And the idea when you're trying to build muscle is you have to signal the largest muscle fibers to grow and to activate. The only way you can do that is with a high level of force. So you can't get a high level of force in those high threshold motor units if you're not giving the effort everything that you have. So you need to have both of those 2 points. You need the high level of effort plus the involuntary slowing of the movement speed. The key is involuntary. So you can't just choose to take like a 4 second concentric, is what we would call the lifting portion of a movement. You can't go just willingly 4 seconds. You have to be trying to get like a 1 second. But even though you're giving it all the gas you have, even though you're giving it every last bit of effort, it's not going to happen in 1 second. It's super slow because that's how you know your muscles are getting cooked.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah, right. When you play with the tempo, you're still like you're basically showing that you're able to do multiple reps at a slower rate, which means there's a wide open door to potentially more weight and more mechanical tension because you're trying to like almost artificially make it more difficult. So it can be difficult, it can work, but as far as like being the most effective for muscle growth, um, and
It's really not.
activation, yeah, the effort's got to be even higher
Mhm.
and generally lower rep. And again, this does become sport specific. We talked about this on the last call. Is like my training compared to Tony's is like we have completely different goals.
Yeah, Jack's not
So
trying to build muscle right now. So like his training is obviously going to be different.
I'm just gonna be one. I'm gonna be a multi-tool. That's what I'm gonna be.
Yeah.
But yeah. So one of the things too you're going to run into is more labored breathing as you start to get to those more difficult reps. And we're not talking going to, rep 20, 30, 40. We're talking, in that 4 to 8, 4 to 10 reps. When you start getting to that second half of that rep range, things are getting more difficult. You start getting a little shaky, a little sweaty. And that's because you're getting close to, if not hitting failure.
Yeah. And really the breathing part, it's almost muscle dependent, but it's still not because it depends on the size of the muscles that are doing the work. So I've found that on shoulder movements, I don't necessarily get that heavy breathing as quickly or as easily, if at all. But again, shoulders are small muscles compared to the rest of the body. Whereas if it's like a leg press, I'm getting cooked by the even if it's like a set of like 5 or 6. If I'm doing it properly, I'm cooked by the end of one set.
Yeah, I was just gonna say at front squats, like a 4x4 at like 75% of 1 RM.
Yeah,
And you get to like the third rep, and you're like, "Fuck, okay, here we go." And then you go down, come back up and rack it, and your heart rate
yeah,
spiked because your demand went up, right? Yeah, if anyone's ever gone upstairs and you're like, "Oh, I'm so out of breath," it's only because it was a very short period of time where your oxygen demand increased, so your heart rate spikes. You're not that out of shape, but you might also be that out of shape.
yeah,
But it's kind of a similar concept here. Is like once demand starts increasing, our heart goes, okay, we need to pump more. Body temp goes up, blood gets allocated to whatever's working. So that's kind of where you get some of that. But it's a good, it's a, it's a good thing to look for, a good symptom to know that, you're at least doing something at a high effort.
Yeah. And that's again the key, right? Is you want to make sure that the effort is high. Um, Really from there you want to go and look into how you know that you have hit failure versus maybe you just picked an exercise or you picked a rep scheme that just makes you breathe hard because they're two separate things. Even
Mhm.
though that breathing hard, because really what happens is the breathing hard increases your perception of effort. When we breathe hard, we perceive that things are harder than they are because usually whatever we did that is making us breathe hard is usually pretty hard, right? High rep squats, heavy deadlifts, burpees, Bulgarian split squats, even though I have no idea why anybody uses them because it's completely universally hated. And there are countless other exercises that do anything better from that you're targeting in a Bulgarian split squat. But that's a hot take for another day. Um, is that ties into why I use machines for my group, but that's again different day. Um, but really, like most people can reasonably figure out if they've still got something left in the tank. Even if you stop the set because you think you've hit failure, a lot of times you'll put the weight down and like 10 seconds later you'll start thinking you're like, damn it, I could have done like one or two more. So
Mhm.
then, keep that in mind for next time.
Right.
Um and really that's the key. That's why I stick to a lower rep scheme and lower volume because it removes that cardiovascular demand as much as possible. Still hits, but the more you can reduce it, the more mental space you can leave for actual muscular fatigue. So you can actually push those muscles further without getting interference from your cardiovascular system pumping and shuttling blood everywhere to try to keep up.
And there's what I think is like super beneficial, whether it's machine based or free weight, right? Barbell, dumbbell versus machine, right? There's some in between. But one of the things too is like when you start working in that rep range, you gain a lot more confidence and you start to learn how your body reacts. You start to get more confident under a heavier weight, which translates to like literally everything. Obviously, super high reps, it's a different game too, right? There's different feelings, different adaptation, but you play those two extremes. But when you can start getting close to like true mechanical failure, I find that people become wiser so much more quickly, if that makes any sense. But they understand where failure is and where they need to be. And they very quickly, when you find out where failure is, you don't waste your time over here.
Mm-hmm.
No one wants
Mm-hmm.
to, you're like, oh, I need to stay in this range and I don't spend as much time working out. I get more results. I still feel good.
Yeah.
Obviously, if there's injury, you regress accordingly, but for the most part, that's where people see the most results. When you're hanging out over here, I think a lot of people hang here because of some of the stuff that we're about to get into as far as like mental barriers, fear of failure. But um, a lot of people spend time here. You get some results. It takes you a long time to maybe get to where you want to be compared to the people that spend their time here. Their results come much more quickly because they're training more effectively.
Yeah. The other thing to keep in mind is just like squatting, just like benching, just like deadlifting, training to failure is another skill. And so if you don't develop the skill of training to failure, you're not going to be able to push yourself as close to it as you want to or as close to it as you think you are because you haven't practiced what it feels like. And that isn't necessarily from a point of practicing and experiencing, getting stuck under a bench press. That can help, sure, but or getting stuck under a barbell squat or anything like that. Those can help, but those don't really get you better at training to failure because there's a significant component of that that's more neurologically driven, meaning your body's just not used to handling that weight that you fail under, even either at that number of reps or at that number of pounds or kilos if you're in the rest of the world. Um, and so it's like you have to you're mentally training your body to be able to handle it, one, and two, you're also mentally training that that fear and that caution based part of your brain that is worried about getting stuck under a weight and worried about getting hurt from the weight being too heavy or worried about dropping a weight or it's anywhere in between, right? All that stuff when you're worried about that going into a set, that takes up mental space, just like high heart rate, just like blood pumping, that takes up mental space too. And those can all play into your ability to push your muscle maximally and push it to the limit that you're really trying to get it to when we're talking about muscle growth. And really, that probably applies to all sorts of other training too, like Jack's tactical games training. Like if he's worried about getting close to failure, or if he's worried about something going wrong, if he's worried about falling, or if he's worried about anything like that, that's going to take up space and it's going to hold him back in his training and it's going to hold him back in his performance.
And one of the things too is like knowing, right? Like from a broad perspective, failing's okay. The other thing too is like knowing how to fail. So, it's like having, for me right now, I'm not doing any machines because I'm going to be using like weird implements and climbing and lots of stepping over and sandbags and like stuff like that. But it's like, for example, it's like bench press. If I make sure that I've got the safeties set in the right place, I'm fine. I can drop it from full extension and I'm going to be okay. It's going to make a loud noise, but I'm not going to be touched. It's the same thing with squats. Anything overhead is like, how do I fail? So it's important to understand that. That's something you can very simply YouTube, whatever it is. When it comes to
Yeah.
most machines, probably 99% of machines, 99.9% is super duper safe. It makes a loud noise, but guess what? You're fine. The machine's fine.
Yeah.
It's meant to do those things. Before we get into that, do you want to share any of the videos? It's
I
a to
have
you.
I have one that I found of myself because you sent me a lot of videos of you doing like single rep or like double rep, and I'm like, that's cool.
The
Jack Strong is hell. But I didn't get to look at all of them. But I found one of me. I think I did like
It's,
four. I did a bunch of reps, and you could see a noticeable slowdown over the course of the set.
let's say for me, the shoulder press video. The last one I sent is probably the best representation that I sent. The other ones are
Oh,
lower rep.
that's literally the
But
one that won't open. Hold on.
oh, really?
Hold on. Hold on. Boom. Boom. I like that. How do we get this to work on? Okay, cool. Boom. All right. Let's pull up the old screen, Sherry. Let's see if we can figure this out. Yeah.
You can do it. I believe in you.
Boom. Mm-mm-mm.
I think these are 70s or 75s in the video,
Yeah.
but there's like a clear
Boom.
slowdown, and that's what we're looking for.
All right. Let's go back to, I think, right about maybe here. Boom. Oh, of course, Zoom has a little icon right over the play button. There we go. So here we go. Jack's got real good pace here, super solid form. But what you can see as the set goes on, starting right here, the weight starts getting real slow, especially
That's
around
not the time
that.
to give up.
No, that's the time the work actually begins. Like that's when your muscles are starting to get that growth signal. So you want to push through that.
And
Boom.
that's one too, is like if it was a machine, I might be able to try to squeak out one more or maybe like a partial if I wanted to like just totally go for it. But with dumbbells, I know on that next one, it's if that I think those were 75s. If a 75 starts to drift on me and it comes towards my head, I know I'm better off saving it for the next set. Because you can't at that point too, is like if something comes in, I've got
Yeah.
75 pounds over here and like I have a lot of weight getting ready to go somewhere. So if I can't ditch it out, I just need to know when to call it good.
Yeah. Live
That's
live
the
to
difference.
lift another day. So yeah.
Yes.
And that's, I find that to be the case with most dumbbell movements. Like they come into a spot where usually the weaker side will give out first, right? And so it won't keep up as well. And so to try to keep the weight level, what we'll try to do is we'll try to like contort our bodies. So like
It's going to
if
like
the yeah, so if the left arm is weaker in an overhead press or in a dumbbell bench press, when the left arm is weaker, what we'll do is we'll turn and push the left shoulder forward so that it like keeps the weight level. And then people wonder how the shoulder gets hurt while they're doing dumbbell bench pressing. It's like that you should have stopped before you got there and you'd be fine.
yeah, they weren't prepared for the load, and then they
Yeah.
took the chance of like, I'll just see what happens. It's like, no, it's not the best idea.
Yeah. And so, when we have heavy dumbbells like that, usually, I mean, the easiest, it's easy to practice first and figure it out with a lighter weight to figure out like what's your escape plan, right? Like Jack at the end of that set, he just dropped him on his legs, on his thighs. That's a solid escape plan. Um, and really for a movement like that, that's pretty much kind of it, other than just completely dropping the dumbbell, which that can be an option too. I
Yeah.
would ask your gym because some gyms are more okay with it than others. Some gyms don't really like loud noises and they don't like weight stack slamming and they don't like dumbbells dropping. But every gym is different. So really the best way to figure that out is just ask your gym directly, like, hey, how do you guys feel about this? Right. And
Well,
they'll tell you. They'll know. They'll have an answer.
I work under the impression that if you can't set, if you're going to pick the weights up and use them, you should be able to control them on the way down, especially for something like that, where deadlifts, right? If you have a platform, the right kind of plates, like dropping it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But something like an overhead press, like I was doing, if you're the person that's throwing them down, I honestly lose respect for you because those are expensive. You could damage the floor, they could bounce and hurt someone else. Like,
Yeah.
right, I'm that guy. But it's like you should be able to control them on the way down. That's a skill that you should have.
Yeah. So like really for dumbbells, I think maybe in all cases, Jack, just failure is kind of like a last resort sort of thing, like the exercise bail, right?
Yep.
Um, because yeah, it's like usually if you feel like you can at least get a couple of reps, you should be able to lower the weight back down pretty well.
Agreed.
Now, what can happen sometimes to kind of put an asterisk on that, because this happens to me sort of often, which is like I'll go into a rep and I'm like, I got one more, and I'll go for it. And that halfway point, right when the levers are at their worst, your body's like, hey, guess what? Go fuck yourself.
Yeah, I'm
And
pulling the
you just
plug.
yeah, pulling the plug. You just run out of gas. At that point, really what you should do is just start bringing the weight down. What most people do is they try to just push through it and then they get hurt and they have to bail out of the exercise or whatever else, right? And they damage equipment. You get stuck halfway on that shoulder press, which is usually where it happens at that halfway mark where your arm is completely horizontal. Just start bringing the weight back down because usually at that, if you're at the hardest part, then that means if you come down, it's just only going to start getting easier anyway. So it's safer. And it's pretty much true across the board with most movements. We usually get stuck where the exercise is the hardest. And usually it's where a limb becomes horizontal with the floor. Like with the squat, it's usually hardest when the thigh is completely level with the floor, when it's horizontal. Bench, same thing with the upper arm. Overhead press, same thing with the upper arm. That's usually where it gets the hardest. Occasionally, you can get stuck at the very bottom of the movement, but that doesn't happen that often. And usually, if you're stuck at the bottom of the movement, bottom of a bench, and you've got safeties, you're pretty close to them anyway. So it's like the half-inch drop to get there, and you're fine.
Mhm. Yeah, so I guess like we just kind of touched on some of it, but like when we're talking about mental barriers, fear of failing, it's like if you're afraid of getting stuck under the bar or a weight, first of all, make sure you have safeties. Make
Mm-hmm.
sure in this case you have a spotter for the sake of if you fail. Um, Not that they're going to do any reps for you, but they're there just in case. Like if you don't have safeties for a bench press, you to make sure your collars are off
Yeah, don't
and
use
having a
collars if you don't
spotter.
have a spotter.
Yeah, it's probably best to have a spotter either on the side of you or over top of you. So you can either chuck the bar up or have someone help you pull it up.
Yeah.
Um,
The cool
if
thing is in any gym, if you're not the only person in the gym, you can find a spotter. I know it can seem super scary to ask for help, but the gym is one of the easiest places it is to find some of the nicest people to help. So if you just walk over to somebody and you go, "Hey, do you mind spotting me while I bench?" I've yet to come across somebody that says no. It just it I've
The only
yet to
time
have
is
somebody.
if someone doesn't trust them, their own self, or think they're strong enough. So it's like, find the strong humans. There's men and women out there that are plenty strong. And if you see them
Yeah,
lifting, heavier than you, it's probably a good sign that they can save your life if need be.
yeah. Just they'll come over, they'll say yes. So tell them, "Hey, I'm going for 7, I'm going for 6, whatever it is," and then just be clear with what you're looking for out of spotting. Like if you're benching, like tell them not to touch the bar until you ask for help. You know,
Yeah. You learn very quickly when
sense.
someone takes a rep from you,
Yeah,
and you want to fight for it. Like I have yet to find something that's maybe as infuriating as when someone takes a rep from you, where you're like, I don't know if I had it, but you didn't give me the chance. Like, you jumped in too soon. You
yeah.
know, if I start to,
So
the
just
bar
yeah,
starts
so
to
just tell
press into
them.
my
So just
body,
like
take it. But
yeah, so just tell them that like you'll nod at them or like give them a clear sign ahead of time that like when I do this, that's when I'm done. So until then,
don't
keep
touch.
your damn dirty hands off the bar.
Yes. But yeah, one of those things too is like people worrying about looking or feeling a certain way when you fail. The truth is, it's only weird because most people never get to the point of almost failing or failing. So yeah, it feels weird because it is different. It's amazing how many people are in the gym and it's still different.
Yeah. Plus, again, being in the gym, you're around a lot of people that are doing the same thing. And so everybody's tried benching or tried some sort of movement where there's that chance of failure. So everybody understands, yeah, sure, I don't mind helping you because there's going to be a time where I want help. And it's not necessarily going to be from that person, right? In a direct reciprocal type of exchange, but they're going to ask somewhere down the road, they're going to ask somebody else for help too. And it's this unspoken chain of support throughout the gym where like you ask for a spot, like cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Um, One of the things too, I think, with finding that limit is people say that they don't want to push into discomfort slash pain. And part of that I feel is like not truly understanding what failure feels and looks like. So as soon as they start getting the burn or something like that, that's when they give up.
Yeah. Or as soon as the weight starts getting slow, that's when they stop. And it's like, well, that's why you've been on the same program for 7 months and nothing's changed because the weight hasn't gone up because you're not pushing into failure at all. And so you have to push into that uncomfortable zone. You have to push. It shouldn't ever really hurt, right? It shouldn't really be painful, but it'll very often be uncomfortable as you push into those last few reps and you're grinding through those very slow reps. It will routinely be uncomfortable, but it shouldn't be painful. There is a distinct difference. And you don't have to spend a whole lot of time in there. Like once you you saw a video of Jack with that overhead press. Once the weight got super slow, he did maybe 2 3 reps after that, and that's really it. Like it's really just a matter of just getting into that discomfort zone and then just giving it a few reps while you're in there. And if you can just do that reliably over time, you will get stronger, the weights will go up, you'll build muscle, and you'll start reaping all the benefits that are connected to building muscle, of which there are tons and tons and tons and tons that don't even have to do with aesthetic. That's just kind of like a side bonus. But there's loads of other things that happen from building muscle that you won't get if you don't build muscle, quite frankly.
Right. So, I mean, like part of what you got into too is like you build in more mental toughness when you start playing with those, like the shoulder press examples. Like when you start working in those last 3, 4 reps where it is absolute hell, it's a lot easier to push yourself there or try that next rep. And your body's also more adapted and stronger to handle potentially that next rep that you're like, I don't know if it's going to go, but if it
Mhm.
does go, yeah, that's a big unlock. And we've talked about this before many times, is that when you attempt something that you previously thought was not possible and you succeed, it translates to other things outside of the gym where you're more willing to do something you're unfamiliar with. You're more likely to put yourself in a somewhat uncomfortable position. And I think it makes a stronger human,
Yeah,
which is a really cool thing that I think people don't necessarily connect, or it takes them several years to connect it.
this is the primary benefit of 75 hard. And I know I haven't mentioned it here in a couple of months, so we're long overdue. But this is the primary benefit of a program uh like 75 hard, because it's forcing you to do all these hard things, and you look at the list, and maybe you look at the list and you're like, well, that's not so bad. And then you get to day 3 and you're like, son of a bitch, this is tough. But if you can push through the other 72 days and get everything done, or even if you just push to the end of day 3 and you get it done, it's like, oh wow, I got that done. Then you can look back at that and be like, well, I handled that insanely difficult shit. I can probably handle this other stuff over here. Like the
Mhm.
last time I did 75 hard, I specifically started it. One, I started it because it was when Andy Frisella was starting. So I was like, well, I'll hop on with him. But it also worked out because it was the end of winter into spring here in New Mexico. And the weather at night can go any sort of direction. It can be mild, it can be cold, it can be windy, it can be all the above. And so there were nights that I was walking, because that's usually when I got my second workout in, where it was like 30 degrees and windy. And I hate the cold when it's windy so much. But then like I looked back after I got done and I was like, yeah, I got done. I did those walks, even though I hated it, even though I didn't want to. It was the literal last thing I wanted to do, but I got it done anyway. And so that makes it so, like, now as I'm working more on business stuff, there's like stuff that I don't want to do. And I'm like, remember when you did those cold, windy walks that you hated? Remember when you did 75 hard and you didn't look at the calendar and realize that it was going to run through a nutrition conference with your friends in Arizona, and you're like, I still have to go get my 45-minute
I
walks?
remember that. We were all hanging out,
Yeah.
like we had made dinner and we were, I think someone, Aaron was like singing or something.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm gonna go on a walk. And I don't think you said it very loudly. I knew what you were doing because we had talked previously from the airport. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden people are like, did Tony go to bed? I'm like, no, he's out on a walk. And he was like, oh, really? Like, and these are all people, like fitness people that do the thing, but it's
Yeah.
that idea of, follow the plan, fuck your feelings, follow the plan, do what needs to be done
Mhm.
regardless of how you feel. Um, and
And
that
there were
is,
nights where where I would come in from the walk and it would be like 1 o'clock in the morning, because that was like the night we went out for sushi, and we got back and I was like, I'm so tired.
yeah,
And by then it was like day 50 something, and I'm like, there's
can't stop.
absolutely no way I'm not. Yeah, there's absolutely no way I'm going to throw it away at this point.
Yeah, but that sense of accomplishment, right? There may be that initial frustration, but after that, so you build that
Yeah,
resilience.
and that's the point you were trying to make, and I just completely took us off on a tangent. But yeah, when
That's
you
okay.
when you when you push yourself and you do things that you don't want to do, or push things that you don't think you can do, and then you pull it off anyway, it then translates into other areas of your life. And some people talk about it in the fitness industry. Nobody believes it until it actually happens, but it's a true thing.
I think you have to do it long enough to understand it too.
Yeah,
Until you have that aha
absolutely.
moment, it might not make sense to you, and that's fine, but it will leave it for the elite, the people that are
Yeah.
consistent and truly pursue what they say that they want. I think that's part of it
Mhm.
too. Is
Yeah.
going that extra distance. Um, right. So those things what we were kind of getting as like pushing to nearer to failure becomes less intimidating, and there's lots of transfer to real life. Um, the idea that you always need a spotter, we already covered that, completely false. You have the right setup. If you understand how to ditch a bench press without a spotter, it's or safeties, it's going to be loud. plates are gonna go flying, a bar is gonna whip as the stuff goes, but you'll be fine. I
Yeah.
almost, if you know what you're doing, you're gonna be fine. Um, but for things
People will
like
look at
squat
you
presses,
because they're
yeah,
going to
people
hear
will
loud
look at you.
noise, and it's fine. Like they'll look at you and they'll go back on about their day and realize if you find yourself feeling weird about the fact that they're looking about you, realize that you're pushing yourself while they're probably not.
Mhm.
Although there's also a large percentage of people that are just looking to make sure that you're not dying.
Yeah.
Also that because like if you're dying and you're stubbornly trying to push the bar anyway, even though it's stuck on your throat and it's not moving, like somebody will just run over and help you. If all else, literally all else fails and you're completely trapped under the bar and you, for whatever reason, can't yell for help, somebody will see you, somebody will run over and they'll come help you get the bar up.
Mhm.
Nobody's going to let you die in the gym.
No, I hope not.
I hope not.
Um, and this leads right into it's like the idea of machines are very, very controlled. And we kind of talked about is like you'd have to have some real funky equipment and setup to potentially, actually put yourself in harm's way with a machine when you fail. Most of them are
Yeah.
set up in a manner that you could drop the weight at any point, and so long as your limb is, mostly out of the way, things that are moving should not hurt you.
Yeah. Most of the time, I think if you're gonna get in a bad position that you're gonna get hurt by a machine, it's because you're doing something with the machine and you're using it in a way that it was not designed to be used.
Yes. Don't put
Pretty
your
much it.
fingers in pinch points.
Yeah. Don't put your fingers in pinch points.
Um,
Don't do these weird adjustments where like you halfway lift the stack so you can shorten the range of motion or like all sorts of weird stuff. Just use the machine the way the pictures
it's a
describe, use it the way the video describes. You'll be fine. Like
yes.
Jack said, pretty much every machine is pretty easy and pretty safe to fail from because usually the weight's just going up or it's going away from you or it's going you're pulling it towards you, and so if you fail you reverse direction.
Mhm. And in most cases too, it's like even if you couldn't complete the rep, whether it was a pull, a push, whatever, most times, if you are moving that weight, again, just like the dumbbells, you just control it to go back. In most, like again, in most cases, people, you're going to have enough energy and you're going to have enough grip, blah, 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 to be able to control it back into its
Yeah,
original
and even
position.
and even if you drop the weight and make a decent amount of noise, I don't think most gyms care about that. I think what most gyms try to aim at are the sets where every single rep is accompanied by the weight slamming on the stack. Where like you do a set of 10 and it's accompanied by 10 bangs because you just let the weight completely fall every single time. I think that's more what gyms are trying to avoid because that is definitely obnoxious and there's no reason for it. But I think if you're giving it a good effort to lower the weight as controlled and slowly as possible, even if the weight drops and you make some noise, I don't suspect most gyms will care. But again, just to be safe, ask the gym specifically.
Yeah, because for example, you look at something like Planet Fitness, they literally have something called
This
the
is why
lung
this is why I say most because I'm like they exist.
system. And again, that's creating the culture that they want. Every gym is they can do their own thing. But like Planet Fitness, right? If their decibel meter reads something loud enough, it starts going off, and then the staff will find the human maybe that made the noise and be like, you know what, this doesn't fit our culture. Sorry,
Yeah,
warning, or you have to leave, whatever it is. But again, as long as you're being responsible, and a lot of that slamming is by choice. And again, if it's one time per set and you have what, 1 to 4 sets, that's 1 to 4 slams over the course of a couple minutes, like it's fine. You're not damaging
yeah,
anything, all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Um,
The machine, a lot of people end up worried about the machine too. Like, can the machine handle it? Pretty much, the machine can handle it. Again, so long as you're using it the way that it's designed, it's going to be able to handle. You're basically at that point, you're slamming one stack of iron onto another stack of iron because that's what's making the bang. And so that's pretty much the strongest part of the machine is the actual stack of weight. So it's generally fine. Again, so long as you're not just completely letting go of the handles and just letting it free fall. If you're again just putting in some effort to try to control the weight on the way down, it's going to be fine.
100%. Yeah, we kind of talked about how to fail on a lot of other things. Stuff like Smith machines, plate loaded, or plate stack, I should say, with like the pin versus
Mm-hmm.
plate. If someone's using like the large like metal round plates. It's making sure that you have the appropriate floor underneath you. A lot of times there will be a deadlift platform or additional rubber on top of the floor or bumper plates, which are usually wider and
Mm-hmm.
weights from 10 to 55 pounds per plate are all the same diameter in general. But it's making sure that you've got the right floor, the right plates. If you don't know these things, you can always ask someone at the gym. Um,
I don't know if this is true or not, but this is something I read on the internet, so it's usually 100%
it
true
has
if you
to
read it
be true.
online. But the diameter of those weight plates was chosen so that it's impossible for a barbell to crush your head if it's on the ground.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
like,
it's in general, I think you still have a little.
yeah, so you'll generally have a little bit of space. And so like if things go super, super wrong and you somehow like you completely fall over, the barbell's not gonna contact your head.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, yeah, because I was thinking like, yeah, the depth of your body, like front to back depth of your body. But I'm like,
Yeah,
the average person would get smashed by the bar. But yeah, head. I think that's accurate.
yeah.
Um,
So there's that. So there's that everybody can keep in mind too, that like it's not gonna it's the barbell's far enough away from your head that it's not gonna hit.
yeah,
There's a
it's
chance, obviously, your head could bounce back into the barbell, and that's like a weird dribbly type thing that can happen. But generally, you'll be okay.
you'll be fine. You're gonna be
You'll be
okay.
fine.
Don't let that
Yeah,
scare you.
you'll be all right.
Um, Yeah. No, I mean, I think we kind of covered that as just like you have to learn how to fail, and there's more
You just have to
skill
be,
to a barbell or a dumbbell compared to a machine.
yeah, you just have to get comfortable with it. You have to do it enough times to where you're like, I've been here before. It's fine. I survived. I didn't die. I know how to slide the weights off the side of the barbell if it's a bench press. I know how to roll the bar if it's a squat. Deadlift, you don't have to worry about failing because you can just let it go. I know that I can control the weight back down on a machine. And once you learn that and once you get exposed to that enough, you just get comfortable and you're like, even if it fails, I'm fine because I know how to handle it. Same thing, right? It's like, why can I get in a car on a racetrack and throw it sideways at a wall? Because I know how to turn it away from the wall when it's sliding. Most people will freak out because they don't know how to control it. And if you don't know how to control it, you probably should freak out a little bit. But like
Yeah.
only the point is only through practice you get to a point where you're like, I know what this feels like. I know how to control it. Got it.
hmm How do I counter steer like
Yeah. How do I
this?
counter steer? How much throttle? All that. Do I need e-brake? Whatever, right? How much smoke do I want to make? All those sorts of questions.
You know how
Like
to
I'm about to
drift now?
go, yeah, now you know how to drift. Like I'm about to like when we get
Like
off here,
kicking your set.
I'm gonna go into the theater. I'm gonna get half naked, put on some tights, and go attack people with my body. Like I'm I don't know that no fear is the way to describe it, but I'm comfortable enough with doing stuff that I'm like, it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll dive into the last little section we have here today is just like best practices for training to failure, if we want to title it. So first of all, be like when to train to actual failure. Um, I know, for example, it would be, it's like if you're someone that, if you're in a percentage-based program, like some of my, like the majority of my lifts are actually percentage-based right now. So, like testing out what my one rep is for deadlifts And then the next X amount of weeks of my training is based off of what I pulled or what I bench pressed, what I push pressed, all these different things. So you can the whole idea is that you work in sets and reps that are appropriate based on 75%,
Hmm.
80% of that 1RM. So I'm always being put in the position of like, shit, this is gonna be hard. Like this is gonna be really tough rather than, maybe someone who doesn't know better or have a program where they're like, ooh, I feel the burn. It's like that's not enough. We're not sending the adaptation, we're not sending the signal that we need to. So that's an example of like when to train to failure. And then I know with um, Tony's specific programming too, you take a whole week to go through the movements that you're going to have in that mesocycle, right? That phase of training, and you find out what your true failure is in a certain set and
Hmm.
rep range, so that when it comes time to get to that next week of training, you know where that fail point is, and we stay between these reps with specific weight and always striving for potentially more weight, cleaner reps, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I use failure as a tool, so I kind of pepper it to where just to have everybody remember what it really feels like, so that you one, you know what failure feels like, and two, the idea is to pay attention so that you also know what RIR1 feels like and what RIR2 feels like, because that's really where we spend most of our time. So you want to understand how your body feels and how the weight speed changes as you go through those, as you get closer to failure, so that you can use that for the rest of the weeks, because that's where we spend most of our time. And the reason, I don't use failure a whole lot outside of that, it's like you said, it's maybe once, maybe twice per mesocycle. And because at that point, the goal isn't necessarily to focus on building muscle. The goal there is to learn how your body responds to the weight, how your body responds to the movement. Because depending on the muscle, the rate that failure kicks in can be a little different in different parts of the body. So the weight can slow down for something like a leg extension, but you might still have like 6, 7, 8 reps. Like once it starts slowing down. In comparison, if it's something like an overhead press, you might start to hit that slowdown and only have like 2 or 3 reps. And so you need to spend time playing with failure to understand, okay, my body responds this way for my quads, it responds this way for my lats, and pay attention to those differences for different muscle groups. Because if you try to train your quads with the same mindset that you're going into shoulders, you're probably going to leave a lot of quad response on the table.
Mhm. Yeah. Bigger muscles, different endurance tolerances, so you have to load
You have to,
appropriately.
yeah, you have to adjust accordingly based on the muscle, and it's different for for everybody too. So like, I would love to be able to come on here and say everybody's quads can go further than everybody's shoulders, and it's just not the case. Like you
Mhm.
have to,
There's individual variants.
you have to figure it out for yourself, because some people may just have more resilient shoulders just as a result of their upbringing, a result of their lifestyle. So
Yep.
that's all.
Yep. Yeah. Then, looking at free weights where like again the example with the shoulder presses, if it were a machine, I could have gone for another rep and a half if I wanted to just absolutely squeeze all the juice, but it is wiser for me to stop sooner so I don't have an issue of something coming at me. Now, if I had a spotter, I could have someone that's got their hands ready by my wrists or by my elbows ready to help me finish the rep. Or if something starts to come towards my head, they can grab it and, keep me safe. But I didn't have that. So, or I chose not to ask for it. So
Yeah.
I
The
stopped
great
with that
thing
one rep
the
in
great
reserve.
thing as an aside is, if you are going super heavy to where you're only doing like a set of 4 or 5 or 6, you don't have to go to complete failure to signal muscle growth. You Because you right off the bat, the weight's already moving slow, so you're already where you want to be. You're just trying to amplify that signal. Just as a
Mhm.
just as a side note.
That's a good point, though. Compared to, again, like compared to machines. If I was doing a shoulder press machine, I 110% would have gone for that extra little bit. But again,
Mhm.
with free weights, with dumbbells, barbells, it's not as easy. um,
Yeah,
to go through
there's more risk
failure.
involved.
Yes, and it's not worth everyone's risk tolerance is a little bit different, but as long as you're in that, 0 to 2 RIR and things are going looking good and you're not going to, technical failure, you're in a sweet spot. You are in a sweet
Mhm.
spot. So, yeah, but it's always trying to figure out is like how do we find that 1 to 2 reps in reserve? And like Tony mentioned, is just like it's good to regularly test these things
Mhm.
every once in a while because if you're pushing yourself appropriately and granted nutrition's in place too, you should be progressing at a fairly predictable rate and need to test so you can stay on your shit because a lot of people, right, they get comfortable and they don't push and then they wonder why they're not where they want to be. Well, you didn't set the failure standard, so now you just get comfortable with what feels good. And what feels good
Yeah.
is probably adapted to it. So that's something you have to be mindful of. So it's like pushing to true
Yeah.
failure regularly as a meter to see where the majority of your training will be.
Yeah. There's that study that came out a while ago at this point where they had people doing like a set of 10, but they were asked to pick a weight that they thought they could only do 10 reps with. And so they had them do the set of 10, then they had them rest, and then they had them do the exact same weight for a second set, but all the way to failure. And on average, people got 6 more reps on average, which means some people got fewer. So some people were a little more accurate, but also as averages work, some people got more than 6 reps. So there were people in that study that were severely underestimating what their bodies could do. And so if you think that you're getting close to failure, but you're really not, it's going to be short circuiting any progress that you may be aiming for.
Mhm. So work on finding where failure is if you want to make a lot of progress. Again, we've said it a couple times, make sure you have spotters. Safety, a more controlled environment will allow you to reduce risk and very, very potentially, improve your results. Um, One of the big things too we've been talking about, even as of lately, the last handful of episodes, is if you're training to failure every single set, one of the things you can do is reduce your total volume and you avoid the extra fatigue. So it's like instead of having super high rep sets where you lose gas, you lose grip, you lose your ability of like your force production goes down, so much so that you lose that maximal mechanical tension, you're just kind of wasting your time and energy. You are wasting your time and energy. So it's like, how do we reel it back in and stay within sets and reps where you are staying effective without just accumulating what we would call garbage volume?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if I wanted to dance more with failure, usually what I would do is probably 2 sets per exercise after a couple of warm-ups, of course. And the reps would usually be pretty low, somewhere between like 4 to 8. And yeah, it'd be 4 to 8 reps, it'd be 2 sets, and then you'd move on. Um, yeah, I mean that's basically how I would structure that. Ironically, that's how I structure all the training for my group. So weird.
Get it? Where I don't necessarily do that for everyone, but if someone's got more sport specific goals, which I tend to have a handful of people,
Yeah, you have a lot of
I've got some.
athletes.
Yeah, or like recreational athletes where it's like their training is different than again, like probably half my people are very like powerlifting, strength based, where their rep
Hmm.
ranges are not to go over 10 would be surprising. And then there's the other people that are more athletic, like
Hmm.
Kyle, who we have back on, who's a soccer player, or I've got a swimmer, and it's like their reps are going to be higher. They're
Yeah,
endurance
they just
athletes.
will. Hmm.
It's a different, we're training something different. Um, Oh, I forgot to tell you that one of Kyle's games, he stepped out on the field and the announcers were like, and he's the biggest man on the field, Kyle Crane, something something, and being 6'2" and 220, he's not a small soccer player.
Amazing.
But there's been a couple games where they call him out like that, and it's pretty funny. But yeah, so. Um, to kind of wrap things up, I think the overarching theme is like training to failure is a skill. It's even more so of a skill with free weights. But again, still, it's like even with machines, like it is a skill to find like where true failure is, how to test it regularly enough so that you are working in that realm of where you're getting the best results and not wasting your time.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean that I think sums it up pretty well, actually.
Mhm.
Really, you also got to remember and keep in mind that failure is not necessarily the enemy. You don't really want to avoid it at all costs. In fact, it's actually part of the process. It's a requirement to getting stronger because it's only as you get close to failure that your body responds and goes, "Oh shit, we got to get stronger because we don't want to reach failure." The body itself doesn't want to reach failure. This is why it responds by getting stronger and building muscle. But in order for it to do that, it must be pushed to failure or close to failure first. So it'll only do it in response.
Our body's all about self-preservation.
Yeah,
So we
it just wants to
have
stay
to push
alive.
it. Yeah, we have to push it. We have to push it out of where it decides it wants to stop. Otherwise, you're always going to be kind of mediocre and wanting more, and then trying, doing things, constantly showing up. I've been working out this way for years, and I'm not where I want. It's like because you're not pushing enough. You're this
Yeah.
close. You have the routine. You have all these pieces down, but you don't have an understanding or structure that allows you to get to that next level. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's pushing yourself safely, learning your limits, and then learning and watching where everything progresses to with yourself, your performance, your aesthetic, whatever you're chasing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, Jack,
who's your friend?
I think that's a great place to leave everybody for the week. I think if anybody wants to talk more about failure and realize that they've maybe got some more questions for things that maybe we touched upon, or maybe some questions that we didn't quite answer, they can definitely reach out to us. They can hit us with those questions on a bunch of different places, and we're happy to talk more about each and all of those questions. Jax, starting that off, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Facebook at Jack Sullivan or Instagram at modern__strength, where we encourage failures to get together. Tony, where can you be found aside from Colorado?
So, aside from Colorado, here in about an hour, if you're in Albuquerque, you get downtown, you get to the El Rey Theater, you can find me at Duke City Championship Wrestling tonight. You can find me in Denver tomorrow at Rocky Mountain Pro. You can find me in Wyoming on Saturday, also for Rocky Mountain Pro. But if you just want to talk fitness stuff, you can find me here at Tony Davis on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram at Tony Davis Coaching. You can find both myself and Jack on our YouTube channel that we don't talk nearly enough about, but it's been there for a few weeks at this point. You just go to YouTube, you type in Made of Metal, you find us. You'll find all of our recent episodes that we've had posted there, so you can rewatch them as you see fit. Uh, Aside from that, there's another great episode, Jack. I think we nailed this one out. We got started a little bit late, but that's it's neither here nor there. It's yeah, it's just what happens. But we got it done. Uh so if you watched, we appreciate you. If you're watching in the future and you're just watching a recording, we appreciate you just as well. We'll let you go. We'll let you enjoy the rest of your Thursday. We'll let all the people watching in Albuquerque have some time to get their families together, get everybody dressed, get in the car, get to downtown, get to the El Rey Theater, come to Duke City Championship Wrestling, watch me wrestle as Tommy Two Scoops and I defend our tag team championships. And if you're not in the Albuquerque area, head to the Duke City Championship Wrestling YouTube where you can see that match here in the next few weeks as we release it. But you can also watch some of our past matches there as well. So until next week, we'll leave you guys to it. We'll let you guys enjoy yourselves. Jack and I will be back next Thursday with another episode of Made of Metal.
Toodles.